All right, so probably one of the most interesting setups here at the 2022 North American International Auto Show is this thing. And I know you've probably seen it in the background of other videos that I've been doing. Currently there's a bit of an interview going on here, so I'll let them finish up that. But then I am going to interview this gentleman right here on exactly what you're looking at. All right, so I am here with Colin, and he is with ASX,
yep.
I guess is what you would say?
Aerospace Experience Technologies. We're a small startup based in Detroit City Airport. A really small team, really small company, but we're here out at the Detroit Auto Show trying to make a big impact. You know, aircraft, you don't really expect that at the Detroit Auto Show much, but Detroit's kind of bringing in urban air mobility, which is kind of a market that we're going for. You know, we're not the only electric aircraft here. There's a couple smaller ones, but we're definitely the biggest one, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
We're trying to make the biggest statement here. So this is an eVTOL, an electric vertical takeoff and landing. A lot of words, but pretty much what that means is we take off like a helicopter and then fly like an airplane. Okay. Can go about 100 miles of range, kind of dictates by the batteries. So we're fully electric, six electric motors. It's a really cool aircraft.
So from a payload capacity perspective, you say 100 miles roughly. Does that vary depending on the amount of payload that you have hanging underneath it?
Yeah, how much payload, how much batteries we're at, how fully charged they are. That kind of varies a lot, and just like any other Tesla or any other electric vehicle that you're driving, batteries is a huge thing. So especially for aviation, you don't just have to roll those batteries on the road, you actually have to fly them, and it takes a lot more energy to do so.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine the various FAA rules that you have to adhere to if you're going to be piloting one of these.
The second challenge we're dealing with is the FAA. A lot of other better known companies that are designing eVTOLs, that's a huge thing that we have to push through right now, which is there's not really many laws dictating us of what we can do for unmanned electric aircraft, but that's a challenge because we have to design to laws that don't necessarily exist yet.
Yeah, right? Yep. So I guess from a redundancy perspective, let's say you have an engine failure. Yep. Can it still sustain flight even if you've lost one of your electric engines?
For a short period of time, just like any other aircraft, you're not exactly going to fully finish your mission. But with 6 rotors, you can lose one complete motor and still fly a little bit to get safely back on the ground. Basically, just shut down your opposite motor that failed.
Very cool. So from a use case perspective, what are you all anticipating? Who is going to be the main client of this type of product, do you believe?
Anybody. So if you look around our booth, we have a couple different flyers and posters going around. I say anybody because this aircraft itself, this flyer, can do a lot of different missions. It can do cargo, which are going to be most likely our first customer. Then we're going to go to air tourism, rescue, defense possibly, you name it, we can probably do it. Because the whole mentality of this aircraft, you know, there's helicopters that exist, there are aircraft that exist, there are electric VTOL that exist, but what makes us special is we have detachable pods. And the idea isn't exactly new, but nobody's really done that before. So that's kind of what makes us special. This aircraft itself can fly passengers one day, then it can go pick up your groceries another day. It can go do cargo missions for some warehouse company or logistics companies another day. And that's what's really cool. You can keep the actual aircraft itself always flying. Your expensive part is always working, always up in the air, brings costs down, brings usability up, and that's kind of what we're aiming for. So if you break it down, each individual concept isn't new. It's been done for tens, 20, hundreds of years, but nobody's actually combine everything into one functioning flying aircraft. And the concept on paper is easy, but once you actually put your foot down and actually do the work, it's a very complicated thing to achieve.
I would imagine the concept on paper is easy if you have the right aeronautical engineers working on the concept, right? So that's kind of the key, is you have to have a lot of very smart people that are contributing to the brain trust of ideas to really make something like this a reality. Because again, making something fly isn't necessarily new.
No.
Making something fly sustainable, in a sustainable, reliable way that's safe.
Exactly.
That's really what takes the idea to that next level, and then adhering to whatever the FAA dictates is the compliant way of doing it.
So that's why the FAA is being really stringent, and especially unmanned aircraft, right? There's plenty of manned aircraft in the air, but Just like the ground, you know, there's a lot of rules and regulations that are currently being developed for autonomous vehicles. Well, in the air, it's no different. If anything, it's 100 times harder as well, because an airplane has to go through FAA certification, no matter if it's a 2-seater or a 100-seater aircraft.
So a question I have for you is, so from a connectivity perspective, from the ground to the aircraft, what technology you're currently using right now?
So for a prototype, it's professional grade, wireless telemetry, just radio controlled autopilot.
Okay.
But Walt, who's actually over there, he can actually speak to more in depth of the actual ground to air technology, because that's what he's actually part of developing. Because say you have an unmanned aircraft, well, there's no human eyes in there. There's no person in the seat making those human decision of what's right, what's wrong to do. So obviously there has to be a complete infrastructure developed from the ground up for autonomous air mobility. So and it's not even just our aircraft. What if another company has an autonomous air vehicle in there? You know, they can't just have their own proprietary system, magically work with ours. There has to be some sort of combined technology that everything actually works together.
Yep, and then I imagine just because of its sheer size and weight, you'll probably have a lot of communications with ATC.
Exactly.
So they understand what's taking place, because this is not a small footprint. I mean, do you know the dimensions off the top of your head?
40-foot wingspan.
40-foot wingspan, roughly. I'm going to guess about 12 feet tall too.
Yeah, 12 and a half.
Yeah. Let's go take a look at some of these pods if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay, so we have two different pods, right? That's what they're being called. My guess is this is a passenger pod and that is a cargo pod.
That's exactly right. So we have two pods here. They're our first prototypes. We're kind of to see how the public reacts to them, and we're really happy with them. They're sleek looking, they're pretty modern looking. You know, our lead designer, Camilo Pardo, put a lot of work into these, and we're really happy to showcase them and see what people like about them. So what's special about these pods is we have this ground robot right here that's fully autonomous, and that's kind of part of what's making us special. Is cool, we have these pods that can be put on the aircraft, taken off, but something's got to do it, and we don't want to have people with tools on the aircraft. You know, that's more people you have to pay for. So if you have a robot that's scheduled to do autonomous missions, well, what if you're at a warehouse, you have 10 of these pods, you're ready, you can take your time, pack them up, charge these pods up, because we're actually planning on putting the aircraft batteries in the pods in the future, which is really cool for us. And what that allows you to do is you can push a button, a robot comes, picks a pod up, you don't have to do anything. It drives along the roads, goes to the vertiport, which we're calling them, comes in, plugs into the aircraft. The aircraft then goes, flies where it needs to go, does its mission, comes, picks up another pod if it has to, or comes back to its vertiport. Another pod automatically loads, and this wing just keeps flying and flying and flying. And that is pretty challenging to do, but the big thing is it keeps the cost down, because the sensor part is a part that goes up in the air. Okay. This has to be certified, that has to be tried, true, and tested to actually go flying autonomous missions. So if you can keep the expensive part always working, never idle, that's how you keep your costs down. Because what if you have, imagine having $1 million truck and it's sitting idle half the time it's working. Well, if it's working 100% of the time, you can double your profits you're making off that truck, and you can have your cheap ground-based portion idle.
Okay. So a couple things, observations that I'm making. This is clearly a vertical takeoff device.
Exactly.
And then do you call them nacelles? What do you call the actual engine units?
Oh, we call them motor pods. You know?
Okay.
Vertical motor pylons, there's a few different names for it, but pretty much the motor pods.
Okay, and they rotate horizontally for, I guess, flight, right? Yeah,
so what happens is, in this configuration, you'll have one of these pods come up, attaches, it takes off just like a helicopter, and then what happens is the whole wing and all the arms and motors themselves will tilt forward, while what we call the chassis, or the empennage in aviation terms, and our pod stay level. So that's always level. The whole wing tilts forward and slowly accelerates into traditional cruise flight.
Okay. What's your ceiling on this?
That's varied. It's not really determined quite yet. You know, probably about 10,000 feet. You know, we're only going about 100 miles or so, so it takes a lot of energy to go up.
To go up and then bring it back down.
Going up that high if you're just going to come right back down.
Okay.
So this is really designed for 100-mile hops, really city to city, right? Because honestly, with battery technology, that's really all we can achieve right now for aviation, or at least something of this size that can carry about 2,000 pounds.
Oh yeah, so from a top speed perspective, what type of airspeed are you seeing?
Oh, we're aiming around 200 miles an hour.
Wow.
So imagine you can go from one warehouse and one basically in one county to a warehouse, another county or city in about 30 minutes. You skip all the traffic, there's no idling, there's no wasted gas. Obviously, the energy has to come from somewhere, so that's a whole different topic. But just imagine you don't have to wait in traffic or anything like that.
No, you're right. And you know, from an immediate use perspective, I can really see this from a global perspective, really, like you said, search and rescue.
Yeah.
That's a big application because 100-mile range is a pretty significant range, and I'm sure you could equip this thing with FLIR. You could equip this with all sorts of thermal technologies to be able to kind of see what's going on, especially in inclement weather. So how does this perform in, like, you know, let's just say inclement weather, tornadic, hurricane type environments?
Yeah, so imagine the hurricane going on, right? There's obviously rescue missions that already happen, but there's nothing really that can carry this much weight, this many people autonomously.
Yeah.
Right? And that's one of the things that we could potentially aim for, where we don't have to risk rescue personnel actually going into those environments.
Yep, absolutely. So only because my viewers will ask, and you may not be able to answer this question, but if I wanted to go to a dealership lot and pick one of these bad boys up, which I know is totally a fictitious way of buying one of these, is there a price you can discuss on something like this?
Just like any other project, it varies, but I can give you a perspective. If you look for a comparable aircraft, we're about 1/3 of the cost. And I say it that way because for this thing itself, which does fly, we actually had our first test flights a couple weeks ago. For this thing to fly, there's only 6 moving parts in the whole aircraft. 12 if you include our cooling pumps, but really the actual propulsion system, there's only 6 moving parts, and that's literally just the motors themselves. Versus if you look at a comparable aircraft that usually has a turbine engine, there are hundreds and thousands of moving parts, so obviously cost goes up, complexity
and the
goes
aviation
up,
fuel cost.
maintenance goes up and such. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, is we're trying to simplify things as much as we can, which, just like anything else, you know, it's fun. It's fun, it's easier said than done, but it definitely gives a huge challenge because you gain simplicity, but you sometimes actually increase complexity in terms of engineering design itself. So now you've got to combine 10 different actions into one component.
No, you're right. So I guess I'm going to preface my question off of an answer you just gave me. So you said 1/3 the cost of a competing type traditional fixed wing or rotary wing aircraft.
Yeah, helicopters.
Can you give me an example of a type of aircraft this would compete against? I don't assume like your traditional Cessna or something like that, but what would you say would be, you know, the direct competition from a traditional aircraft perspective?
There's a helicopter, basically, it's called the Sky Crane, right?
Oh yeah,
not
Sky Crane.
Not exactly 2,000 pounds, it can carry a lot more than 2,000 pounds, but if you were to rent that helicopter for say 1 hour, you're $20,000. You just want to lift some like rescue material, some sort of supplies.
Yeah.
Right? Dude, like $20,000 an hour versus this, significantly cheaper.
Well, and you can run this on multiple trips, whereas with the Sky Crane, you deal with aviation fuel. You have to have a lot of service, a lot of maintenance, and a crew to really handle that, where something like this seems as if it's a more practical solution as long as you don't need to go above that 2,000 pound or 100-mile range capacity, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, Colin, once again, I truly appreciate you showing me this absolutely beautiful piece of machinery right here. Super cool to see where the industry's gone and what technology is emerging and coming along. So, yeah, if you guys want to know more about this, I'll try to get more information, try to keep in touch with them, and maybe sometime in the future we can actually see a live demonstration of this thing working. Absolutely. Anyways, thanks again. Guys, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up. We'll talk to you again very soon.